Welcome to The Screen Queen, the show where I'll be talking about your favorite TV show or your favorite movie. You'll just have to listen to find out. This is your host, Samantha Parrish. Well, hello there, and welcome back to the show. As always, I am your lean, mean movie talking machine, your host, Samantha Parrish. So, Kingsman came out of nowhere. It's weird to have to say that Kingsman isn't your traditional comic book live-action movie, but it also is a traditional live-action comic book movie. I mean, for fuck's sake, the first film is directed by the guy who did X-Men First Class. It has all the makings of a comic book live-action movie, but it went completely under the radar. Everyone that I've talked to about the Kingsman films have never heard of Kingsman, but once you know it, you can't forget it. It is such a great film series that was a step away from the usual comic book movies that we got. This was like a palate cleanser from the stuff we got from DC, Marvel, and especially for people that love comic book movies, but they want something different. Someone like me appreciates a film series like this. I mean, everyone that I have showed Kingsman to have enjoyed it. That's very rare, that I can show a movie to someone and they'll like it every single time. That's how good Kingsman is. When I first pulled Kingsman out of my suggestion box, I saw that it was one of the films, but I thought, it's been a while since I've done a episode covering multiple movies. I did that with my Rambo episode, the Cars episode, and now here is a triple threat like Kingsman. Well, we're going to put quotation marks around triple because there's a lot to talk about this very interesting history of a different kind of comic book action movie. So, here we go. This is the Kingsman series. Starting the episode off with Kingsman: The Secret Service. This film came out in 2014. Under the radar completely. People were baffled to find out that this was a movie they didn't hear about, but it was such a great movie. Kingsman has all the qualities of your usual action movie, but because it is both an American and British movie, it kind of has a blend of both cultures, that we get both types of filmmaking, both types of storytelling. And that really works for the whole series. Like, the closest thing we even have to that is like James Bond, and they even make a reference and a joke to James Bond in this movie. In a way, Kingsman: The Secret Service is both fresh air to the spy genre, but also kind of like a commentary. I love the movie for the fact that it's not telling us something that we already know, because we've gotten accustomed to other spy movies like Nikita, James Bond, Jason Bourne, all of which are referenced in the movie that I just now remembered. See, you see what I'm talking about here? This is a film that's done its homework on how to make a spy movie by having to tell the audience, hey, we're aware that you're familiar with what's going on here. The timing of Kingsman coming out in 2014 has a different feeling now that the film is almost 10 years old. Looking at the timing, it was coming out before one of the biggest films of spy movies, Spectre. That's a big feat to have to go in front of a James Bond film to come out, since Kingsman is both a comic book film and a spy film. So it's like, it is a double hitter with what it's making. But the film is also self-aware to show the references to other spy stories that have come out before this one. I mention that because I do not know on top of my head when the comic book series began. So it probably has a different time capsule to exist in, where things have now changed and things have to be modernized. It's not going to be made in the time period that it was first written in. So now it has to write itself in the decade where it's every spy movie for themselves. Everything was trying to be a different kind of spy movie from James Bond, and well, Kingsman was the one that brought the most to the party. Before I gush and go on to this movie, I need to go ahead and establish what this movie is about for those that may have never heard of Kingsman, because I don't believe in keeping people in the dark. So here is your synopsis about Kingsman: The Secret Service. The plot follows a young man named Eggsy, as he's just been going through life, defending himself, protecting himself from certain thugs. He could have had everything in life to be a Marine, go on to greater things, but he chose to take care of his mother. However, his father's death has remained a mystery to him, and he was given a necklace that he always wears that has a number on it to call in case there is an emergency. And one day, well, out of honor and camaraderie for his friends, he takes the heat on a Grand Theft Auto charge and calls the number. And the first thing that he says is what he was told 20 years ago: Oxford's not brogues. And he's like, okay, that was stupid. And then all of a sudden he is released from prison and finds this sharply dressed, dapper man named Harry Hart. Harry Hart is a spy for the organization known as Kingsman, hidden in plain sight as tailors, which is what caused Eggsy to be like, I don't get why my dad worked with tailors. And Harry Hart's like, oh, a tailor, just the Tinker, Tailor, Soldier, Spy kind. He didn't make that reference in the movie, and I'm kind of shocked he didn't. Come on, man! If you're gonna fucking spy movie, get all the spy movies. Come on! Anyway, back on the topic. So, Eggsy learns all about the Kingsman Service and is going to be trained with other recruits to see who will be the newest spy for Kingsman. However, there's another issue going on. It's not just the fact that Eggsy's learning to be a spy, but there's an underlying issue that there is a guy coming up through the grapevines named Richmond Valentine that is making these devices that definitely don't seem like he's trying to plot world domination. And now it's up to Eggsy and everyone else to save the day. But damn if it isn't a good time watching him save the day. So, when I watched the first movie, there's a lot to digest. The fact that there's so much star power behind this film. But one star power I want to make notice of is Colin Firth. I had always known Colin Firth is going to be in an action movie. Despite the fact that this man is older than my mother, I knew at some point they're going to have to nab him for an action movie. There's always a way that you can work around someone's age or physical appearance and help them be the best action hero. I mean, Colin Firth doesn't scream Schwarzenegger, doesn't scream Stallone, but the way that they made his character work as a man, you would definitely not think would be a threat. Harry Hart just feels like your traditional spy character while also being a new spy character. There have been many older British spies. I mean, for fuck's sake, again, I have to mention James Bond. Those are a plethora of older British action actors, but Colin Firth has not gone into the ring to do an actual action hero, but it would fit for something in the comic book realm. Comic books are an amalgamation of having characters you would never pen to be a threat. And having Colin Firth on the screen with both the charm, charisma, that can easily lead to being an intimidated character, knowing, I don't want to piss you off. Imagine if he brought this kind of tenacity to his role as the father in Nanny McPhee. Oh my god, those kids would be impressed and terrified. Okay, I'm going to pump the brakes on the Harry train so I can keep talking to everybody else. Because if I have the power to talk about Harry Hart, oh my god. Oh, that's too much power. I could never stop. Moving on to the other characters. I feel like it's important. We gotta talk about, the reason why we're here. The reason why people showed up is, well, Eggsy. Now, here's the thing that I've always wondered about the film in terms of its marketing is how come they didn't put up Taron Egerton's name? Nowadays, Taron Egerton has become a staple with the action genre. He's been in some majorly popular films like Sing. He was the voice of the gorilla, which I've never seen the movie, but I'm sure you'll know what I'm talking about. He played Elton John for Rocket Man. More about that later. He went on to go to Robin Hood, and he was in the immensely failed film the Billionaire Boys Club, which, I mean, at least he was the best part of that movie. Let's just put it at that. Gosh. And he's currently on an Apple TV show called Blackbird. I had to think about it for a moment. That was a major, crash course on if I knew anything about this guy, and I kind of amazed myself how much I knew. But then again, that's the thing about Taron Egerton, is he's in more things than you think. He's become one of, our popular actors, and he's also severely underrated. And I don't know why he's underrated when clearly he's in so many popular projects. But Kingsman, that's always going to be the thing that got him to where he is today. Why we know about him is solely because of Kingsman. So why the fuck isn't his name amongst everybody else? I don't know. They put his picture on the front cover. They put his picture on the next movie. But I don't know why they didn't market his name. It just feels a little bit weird. But then again, I'm not in charge of that. I don't know how that process works. Well, some of it. But that just always felt a little bit weird to me. At least he's so popular to the point that you don't have to see his name on the front cover to know, yep, there's Taron Egerton. The way Taron Egerton plays Eggsy, it's often been described as a rags to riches character, or I guess you could also squint and say it's like in the same realm of Mulan in a way, with having a character going into immense training to be a soldier, protect their loved ones. This is kind of like a little bit of all those heroic characters you see go through a training montage to never forget their roots of where they came from, and that's going to challenge them for where they go into a major conflict of where they want to go to in life. It's the same song and dance we've seen in so many films, but the way that Kingsman came together, it doesn't feel like those same kind of movies. There are many plot twists involved with Eggsy's journey about how he got to be where he is and the dynamic he shares with the other trainees. I love how it could have easily been that film to just let the cliches speak for itself, but Kingsman was like, no, we're a different type of spy film. Cliches don't belong here. You can squint and see them, but then be surprised that it's not a cliche. But the one thing that has really shocked people about this film are the cameos. There are people you would not have pegged to be in this film. I mean, I'm surprised with having to say the word peg that Simon Pegg didn't show up in this film. Could still happen, though. I don't know. Could still happen. So, in the first 20 minutes, Mark Hamill shows up as the character Professor Arnold. And I'm like, okay, I recognize that's Mark Hamill, and they probably put him in this film because he's a recognizable character. However, the cameo was so distracting that I kind of forgot his character a couple of times. I'm like, oh, yeah, Mark Hamill's here. Why is he here again? I forgot. I'm so starstruck. The one thing that movie critics have pointed out is when he's on screen with Samuel L. Jackson, and it feels like a very strange confliction of seeing two people from the Star Wars franchise, and it's like, oh, what strange representation in a film that you wouldn't think to see that because no one really saw it back then. So the next cameo I want to talk about, it's someone that you won't know, so it kind of defeats the purpose of saying it's a cameo when usually cameos are more popular, like the last guy I just mentioned. So this man's name is Richard Brake, and that is a name that you have probably never heard of in your life. It's a name that I had a hard time remembering, but I always knew his face and his name because he popped up in Doom, many Rob Zombie movies, and to my knowledge, he was in a season of Game of Thrones, and that's about as much as I know, but he's been in so many popular things that it did warrant him a cameo in here. And he does play a perfectly good, sketchy guy. If you don't remember him in the movie, let me paint the scene for you. At the part of the movie where the last trainees, Eggsy, Roxy, and Charlie, are being tested in a way that they didn't see it coming, that what they thought was going to be a simple mission to get this girl and keep her safe, turns out that they were not safe, and they got drugged and tied to a train and being interrogated about what they know about Kingsman. And Richard Brake goes on to say, what is Kingsman? Is Kingsman worth dying for? And looking at him, I'm like, I know I've seen you somewhere. I know I have. And once I looked him up, I'm like, oh, So you played a cameo. You played outside of your usual roles of the sketchy, creepy guy in the horror films to the sketchy, creepy guy in the action movies. Which honestly is a breath of fresh air. I wish he would do more non-horror projects, because he fits right in. In a way, the best way that I can describe Kingsman, it's like a roller coaster. The action scenes really do feel like you're right there with the action. And usually that's been kind of the game changer with a lot of action movies, is having it closer to the character and feeling like one continual shot, so you're there for all of the action. But Kingsman took it a step further to be present for the action, but then also feel like it's going different directions at one time, like you're being placed multiple areas. It's like a very seamless scene to see that it feels like a cog in a machine, and all of the little holes and divots go into each other at the same time. It's one of those rare things to see with action films. I've been watching them a long time. Y'all know I love my action movies, but Kingsman truly is unlike any other action movie I have ever seen. And I've seen a lot of them. It's making me question my love for the other ones. That's how much I love it. But with that said, as much as the action is wonderful to see on screen, beyond the screen was a different story. There was a major accident that happened on the set of Kingsman, and it's one that the director Matthew Vaughn went on to go say that it was a nightmare when this happened. And there's things can go wrong. If y'all remember my episode I did about Speed, where Jan de Bont went on to mention what happened with the bus crashing into certain cars, and if something messed up, they had to get extra cars ain't cheap, and put them back in the same place until they got it right. And he just said it was an anxiety nightmare. Apply that same story to what happened here, but replace it with water. So if you've seen Kingsman, or you're familiar with the film, if you happen to be one of those people that caught it when it went completely under the radar, then you might be familiar with the water scene. So the water scene is pretty great on the outside. It's Eggsy and the rest of the recruits trying to think fast as their whole entire room floods with waters, and they're trying to figure out, how do you get out of a locked room that's filled with water? Thankfully, Eggsy does find out that it's a two-way mirror, so he's able to punch through it and get everyone out to safety. Before we got that immaculate scene, something horrible went wrong. When they first worked on it, and as a little bit of extra trivia, the water scene was the first scene ever made. So before we got that picture-perfect thing, it was a disaster. Matthew Vaughn went on to go say that when he yelled action, first time for the movie, the computers went rogue, as he put it. That something was not calculated with the way everything was put together, and everything flooded. The timing was off for whatever reason. As he mentioned, the computers went rogue, and I believe it sometimes. Technology will act up at the worst possible time, but it shouldn't have to be when water is involved. So he went on to mention that there were people being pulled out of the water, there was camera equipment everywhere, and he's like, it was disastrous and horrifying for the first day of filming. When it comes to action movies, it's bound to happen that there's going to be a tough slice of life, and you just have to get through it and redo equipment and try to see if something can be salvaged. And I'm glad that he did pursue through the film despite the first terrible experience for the film. And then everything, hopefully and thankfully, went smooth. I didn't read anything else that there was a horrible occurrence that happened. And looking at this film with how much action there is, I'm very surprised there wasn't any more action. They were just like, okay, take notes about the water scene. Let's make sure that this doesn't happen again. And thankfully, everyone really got up to speed with the rest of the action. I read on that Colin Firth had trained up to 6 months to get in top fighting shape and physical form to portray Harry Hart. And like I mentioned earlier, he doesn't look like your typical kind of spy guy, but knowing the fact that he put himself through training to be able to look like it's a flawless fighting scene, it really does build more into the story, and it's wonderful how much everyone put into this film. And it was quite a ambitious film for everybody to pour their heart into it, no pun intended. And I read that Matthew Vaughn gave up doing the next X-Men film to do this. That's a hell of a sacrifice to not go from a comic book movie to do a comic book movie. But the difference is the fact that we probably wouldn't have Kingsman the way it was if it wasn't for Matthew Vaughn bringing that type of action that he does into his own action films and pouring it into Kingsman, and shit, it really needed it. You could give Kingsman to any other directors. You could give it to fucking Quentin Tarantino. You could give it to Ron Howard. You can give it to anybody that knows how to bring charming characters and nonstop action, but there's a specific type of charm and nonstop action you get from a Matthew Vaughn film. But besides my love for Colin Firth in this film, there is another love that I have for this movie that I absolutely have to share, because it physically pains me to not see the proper applause for this actress. So, there is a minor change in Kingsman that has to do with Valentine's right-hand woman named Gazelle. In the book, Gazelle is a man, and in the live action, they changed it from a man to a woman. There's been a lot of fickle debates about changing the genders for some characters because it might deviate away from it, but knowing the fact that Kingsman wasn't really a movie people saw coming, so there was no source material to debate whether it was accurate or if it was a good move, but seeing the way Sofia Boutella really, cut the course for this film and what she brought as the second-hand woman to Valentine, it's fantastic. There's no complaints here. As long as the character is understood, it doesn't matter what gender they are, as long as there's a lot of care and consideration put into it, you're not going to say a complaint for me, and I don't hear anybody else complaining either. She is a woman that, you definitely don't want her to step on your feet, because my God, she's going to just poke right through them with them little specky things she's got in her feet. It is a very interesting, creative villain to have a sidekick that really does feel formidable. And Sofia Boutella has played villains before. She's played sci-fi characters. She's like the go-to girl for films like this. It's just like the perfect pinnacle. She's not really given a lot of attention, and it kind of hurts because if you take her out of the film, you kind of lose a little bit of that action that had that unique unusualness to the villains that stick out. You gotta have villains that stick out somehow. You got Samuel L. Jackson with his lisp, and you got Sofia Boutella with her sticky legs. With her stabby legs. There we go. That's a better way to put it. But Sofia Boutella went all out for this film. She did some intense training for Kingsman. It says right here, they taught me Thai boxing, Taekwondo, and how to work with cables. Gazelle uses her legs to kill, so I had to learn different types of kicks. I'd never done anything like it before. If you think about it, how rare is it that you get a villain or a right-hand man villain or, any kind of villain that primarily uses legs as a weapon than the usual, firearms or their hands? That's usually what you see is hand things. And she does do some intense hand tactics, but it's mostly leg work. She put her, it's like they say, get a leg up. Well, she did. She really put that whole phrase to rest. But the last that I will say about the action tangent before we move on is gotta come back home to Eggsy. Taron Egerton said for this film that it required a lifestyle change for him, like a total commitment to living a certain way and being very militant about what you eat. He said he overall enjoyed the experience and would definitely do it again if there's a sequel, and spoiler, there was. He was thrilled that his body was captured looking the way for the silver screen, adding, to see my body transform and then to have it there forever on screen is quite a nice feeling for generations to come. We can all appreciate my abs. Yes, we do, Taron. God bless your washboard abs. Whew. I'm not even into muscular men, but it brings my Blanche out looking at those abs, man. So before I wrap up my thoughts about Kingsman: The Secret Service, there is one story that I'd like to share that involves this movie. So back around Valentine's Day, ironic, Richmond Valentine's Day, I just saw the logic in that. There is a man that talked to me on Facebook, and I could tell this was like a fraud account, but I like to play with fire before I put it out. And this man goes on to say, I know what you need. I know what all women need. And I'm like, oh really? Someone watched What Women Wants with Mel Gibson. I see what's going on here. And I knew that he was just being misogynistic by saying things like, I know all about your trauma. I know all about this. And I'm like, oh, you do, don't you? That's like made me sick. And I just said, would you like me to tell you who I am so you get to know more about me, even though you already know so much about me? And he goes, yes, please. And I just whipped out the line that Harry Hart said. He says to a churchgoer, I'm a Catholic whore that enjoys out-of-wedlock sex with my black Jewish boyfriend who works in a military abortion clinic. So, hail Satan and have a lovely day. Of course, I tweaked it a little bit and said at the end, your hunting season is over, you misogynistic dick. But that was so much fun that I finally got to use this line. It has lived in my head rent-free, and I got to use it. I have Harry Hart to thank for that. I think the Screen Junkies said it best about this film when they covered this on their parody segments, where they called it Kingsman that came out of nowhere. And it really did. I wish that there was more marketing for this film, but at the same time, look at Rocky. Rocky was a sleeper hit, and it did very well. This is basically like the millennial generation of Rocky, where you have a film that, it didn't get much marketing, but through like organic marketing and an organic audience, it's going to find its way through word of mouth. And, well, it did, and here I am talking about it. It's still a remarkable film, despite the fact that it's not talked about, but it does have a home with several other people. It still did something for cinema culture, and it brought something different to the spy genre. For having this come out in an age where Bond was still going on, and it didn't fail. Usually that's like a recipe for disaster, like having an animation film come out when an animation film's coming out, or vice versa. This is rare that you get a film with the same type of story and it doesn't deviate away from something else that's popular and is breathing fresh air into it. It's wonderful to see. And then there's Kingsman: The Golden Circle, which is my favorite of the series. This is the Shrek 2 of my life, okay? To give you an example for how much I love this sequel, if you were to ask me what movie I would watch without any hesitation, I would say Kingsman: The Golden Circle. That is one of my favorite movies to just watch. I loved it from beginning to end, and I love it more than the first film. That hurt me to say that about a film that I just said hurt me to say I love it more than action films. It's a constant train of hurt that I keep putting myself through, and I am okay with that. Kingsman: The Golden Circle is just as fun as the first one is, and it definitely knew, going into being an action film, that it needed to be more than the original action film. So for those out there that haven't seen the sequel to this underrated action movie, Kingsman: The Golden Circle follows the events of the first film, where Eggsy has now taken on Harry's spy name of Galahad in his place, since, spoiler kind of alert, Harry gets shot in the last film, and we don't get his body, but we know that he's dead. Quote unquote, dead. Okay? Stay with me here. And Eggsy is doing pretty good. However, there's been a major change of plans where an old foe comes back. Charlie, one of the ex-Kingsman trainees, is now a bad guy. I mean, that's not a shocker, but it is fun to see Charlie again for the fact that he's basically like Gazelle from the first film, because he doesn't have an arm, so he has a robotic arm, so it's like, okay, so you're this Gazelle, so who's Charlie's Valentine then? There's a new threat, and it comes in the form of a rogue biologist that has an aficionado for everything 50s, okay? Tuesday, Monday, she's having happy days. So, she's got some plans for Kingsman to just get him out of the way. And she quite does very fastly as she blows up Kingsman. Everyone is gone. The new Arthur is gone. Roxy is gone. And now Eggsy doesn't know what to do next. All he has left is Merlin, and they're both trying to figure out what's next. So from the bottom of a bottle that they were drinking their sorrows out of, they find a little insignia with their K insignia on Kentucky. And they got their next sign to go to Kentucky. And they end up meeting up with the Statesman, which is basically the southern version of Kingsman. It's just the best way to put it. It's the same thing, but also different. It's kind of weird to say it like that. So now Eggsy's going to be working with the Statesman, but they have something that they themselves didn't see coming. They have an amnesiac, Harry Hart, in their care. There is a movie math explanation that I read years ago that can correctly define what the process is like for Kingsman, just to correctly let you know what you're going to be getting in for. Years ago, when I was watching story notes about this movie called U.S. Marshals, there was a comparison about how U.S. Marshals had to be bigger than The Fugitive. How can you be bigger than The Fugitive? That movie had a fucking train crash, it had bus crash, it had so many crashes. U.S. Marshal, makes sense, you have to have a plane crash. And they said if we made a third movie, there'd be a rocket. I don't know how the fuck they pull it off, but I think they'd pull it off. So put that into the Kingsman movie. The first film had a massacre with 80 people killing each other and trying to kill Harry. There was that underwater scene that went horribly wrong and then went horribly right. And then there was the grand fight near the end where everyone's fucking heads exploded. This movie completely tops the action of the first one, and I don't give that kind of praise very lightly. Like I mentioned, the movie math in The Fugitive makes sense for the movie math right here. This film opens up with a fight scene in a car where the driver is dead and the car is just fucking going everywhere on the road, while Prince's Let's Go Crazy is playing in the background. That is just, chef's kiss. Amazing. They knew how to bring this movie in to remind people what they're in for and why they're here. And then there is the immaculate scene in the film where the transport from the top of the mountain gets severed and is just flying without wires into a ravine, and there's no choice but to pull the parachute on the Statesman and basically have this parachute somehow, some way, get this contraption to land in time before it hits a fucking retirement home. Having to explain those scenes, you can see it's definitely bigger than the first movie. Everything's bigger. The humor, the relationships, the appearances. Like, this film knew how to say, hold my beer. Well, in this case, this movie saying, hold my whiskey, governor, is, so much. Everything in this movie is a wild ride from beginning to end. But as much as I love the action in this film, I also love that there is more emphasis on the relationships, particularly between Harry and Eggsy. In the last film, we saw them develop this father-son bond, which was fantastic to see. And in the second film, Harry's not here, so he's going to carry on. Well, Harry's back in the picture, and honestly, you can't have the film without Harry Hart. I haven't seen any of the fucking comic books, and I know I need to at some point, but from a movie standpoint where this is the cinematic universe of the Kingsman series, I'm glad they kept Harry in there. There's so much else going on in there that Eggsy could carry on the film, but we needed Harry. We need Harry. I love Harry. You all know I love Harry. But as much as I love Harry, they gotta make room for what is considered the best part of the movie, and that's Pedro Pascal. There is no way in rusty wooden spoon hell that I wouldn't talk about Pedro Pascal. That's a law somewhere that I gotta talk about Pedro Pascal. Now, for me, it's a very bizarre way to look at him because I knew of his presence in movies before he got to this critical acclaim with The Mandalorian, The Last of Us, and before he became a cultural phenomenon. And when he started getting popular, I'm like, oh my god, that's Whiskey from Kingsman: The Golden Circle. So oftentimes whenever people mention Pedro Pascal, I'm like, yeah, he's the guy from Kingsman. Even though that kind of became a footnote in his career since everything else took off with the movie he did with Nicolas Cage and the other ones that I had mentioned. But, you know, we wouldn't have him if it wasn't for Kingsman. The man has an illustrious career that goes all the way back to, like, the end of the 90s when he was making appearances on crime television shows, and now he's at a stance where you can't walk down the street or go on TikTok without hearing his name. And the thing I love the most about his now found fame is that people are now starting to see him in The Golden Circle. I have lost count how many times his audio has been used for various audios on TikTok where he just goes, "You can scream out my name all day long, sugar." And I'm like, oh, there's Whiskey. And it is so great to see that Kingsman now has a new home thanks to following the coattails of Pedro Pascal. Even though it was a little unclear about where the Golden Circle was going to go, everyone else kind of went their own ways. But, I mean, I can't not deny the fact that Pedro Pascal became, the pearl in the clam with how his career took off. And now with Kingsman being this underground film, it took a sequel and a major star like him now to push this film a little bit further. And it makes me very happy to see that, because like I mentioned, this is the Shrek 2 of my life. I love this sequel. And as much as I would say I respect his career, but I'm not a major fan of his stuff because I haven't really gotten too versed in Pedro Pascal's other filmography other than what I've heard word of mouth. But at some point I will when I can afford HBO Max and I can see Mandalorian on Disney Plus and go catch The Last of Us. But I definitely respect what he did, and I appreciate him being in this film. So there's something that I have mentioned to my friends about this movie that has really shocked them when I've said this. I really like Halle Berry in this movie. And all of my friends have said, Halle Berry is still around? Halle Berry is no stranger to the comic book world, as she's already played Storm for 14 years? From what I understand, even though I'm not the biggest expert on X-Men. But outside of X-Men, she's always played there's no easy way to say it. She's always played the sexy characters, the eye candy. Like in Swordfish, Catwoman, even though less said about that, the better. And then in the later 2000s and into the 2010s, she just kind of floated around. I was shocked to see her in this film, but I was also happy to see her in this film. She wasn't playing the typical characters that she normally does, being the eye candy or the person that's the main character. She's a side character, and she sticks out more for that. She does stick out more being someone who's not prominently present on screen so much, and is a very different character that she plays, where she is in the same realm of Merlin's character, being the tech person, knowing the whole area, how to get things equipped. She serves as the eyes and ears for the agents in the field, and she does do a really great job. It's nice to see more of a further parallel that Kingsman has with the Statesman. And it really does build everything about the Statesman. I want to know more about this other Secret Service agent. I love Channing Tatum's character playing Tequila. He was so good in that it hurt. And seeing Halle Berry, it has people you wouldn't peg to work together, but I can see them in their roles. I don't see them for their name. I see them for their code name. They do a great job, even though they're not on the screen very long because they're kind of a footnote. And I would say that's my only complaint about, it's my second complaint about the film, that we don't get enough time with the Statesman, which was for a reason, that we were promised a Statesman movie. This sequel of Kingsman was to serve as a prototype for a further cinematic universe for Kingsman. It was basically like building Marvel in the way that we got to know the superheroes, and now we got to know like the character stats of all the characters to know, okay, I want to invest into more of this world. But unfortunately, that didn't happen. So this is the only thing we have to see what it would have looked like to see more of the Statesman. We never got the promise, but, you know, I'll take what I can get. I don't mind rewatching the film to know what could have been. So here's my other complaint about my favorite sequel. I just don't get the character of Poppy. Like, I get the motives. She lives in, like, a nostalgic world, and she is so happy about very morbid things. And I am down for a villain like that. And I'm trying to be very patient and respectful to what was given into the film, because I'm not behind the film. I can't, like, crap on something so much when there were executive decisions that had to be made, and there may have been other ideas behind Poppy's character, and this is what the outcome was. Julianne Moore did go on to say that her character was inspired by Gene Hackman's version of Lex Luthor from Superman. In a way that I can see how it makes sense, I can see the parallels, but making a performance based off of someone else from a superhero film, when this is a spy film, like, I feel like that's the disconnection that I'm making. I don't know if anyone else has seen that. I know Julianne Moore gives 110% into these movies, and she rarely plays villains. I still will carry a torch to the performance she did for Carrie, but I just felt like she got wasted in this film. She looks like she's having a great time, but it just doesn't feel all the way put together. The zaniness is both the good part of the sword and the bad part of the sword for looking at the way her villain is portrayed. It's riding the coattails of Richmond Valentine, that was a very eccentric villain. She herself is also an eccentric villain, and that might be another reason why it hurts the film to look at the progression of it, that it's fun to look at, but then, like, trying to make sense of it all, like, oh, okay, no wonder this feels a little bit like the same. However, I will mention that the best part of her eccentric character is one of the funniest parts of the film, is that her character kidnapped Elton John. It followed up with a side note in the first film that Richmond Valentine had kidnapped celebrities. He kidnapped a princess that no one gave a fuck about in this film. And there was a mention that he kidnapped Iggy Azalea, which, you know, if you think about her career now, that's kind of funny that Kingsman is the only tie to know that she was relevant in that time period. And then to actually physically see a kidnapped celebrity, and that it's Elton John, of all people. I wouldn't have thought that in a million years. Elton John playing a fictional version of himself. And my God, it is hysterical. It is the one part of the villain's scheme that really does match the zaniness of the other action moments. And also, too, I do love the irony that a couple years from then, Taron Egerton would go on to go play Elton John. It is such a funny little early Easter egg that wasn't originally an Easter egg, but now knowing Taron Egerton's career, it's a nice little time capsule to look at. So with the way the Golden Circle is set up, that there is a lot of layers to go through. And my God, do they go through some of those layers? There are some layers that shouldn't have been there, but a majority of the additions to the sequel to the Kingsman movie is highly pursued. And one of the highlights, I have to say, is Charlie. I never thought I'd say that, because he's just the character that you see is going to be groomed to be the adversary for Eggsy, you know. And I love from the very beginning that he's introduced that he has escaped partially unscathed from Valentine's soiree, that all he lost was an arm, and now all of a sudden he's got a fully decked out robot arm and a robot voice. Now, with that said, look at Gazelle from the first film. She was Valentine's right hand second in command. Charlie is a second in command to Poppy. Charlie is basically what Gazelle was in the first film. Someone had to fill in the gap for having a character that has a very unique advantage to them. Gazelle had her cool little stabby legs, and now Charlie has an arm that can virtually do everything. Charlie has so much to do with this story, where a lot of things are placed around him. There's so much chaos going on in the film, and Charlie having a presence in there as a worthy adversary to Eggsy, as well as everything else going on, it really does push the film a little bit further. I never thought I would say that, because I didn't think about it until now, knowing, wow, Charlie really does kind of serve as one part of the glue for this film. But also, too, I want to add on to that villain note where it's a bit of a switch on the genders in terms of villains. In the first film, we had a male villain with a female sidekick. Now we have a female villain with a male sidekick. It's kind of an interesting little parallel that kind of just did a little switcheroo on us. And I like the switcheroo for the most part. Okay, well, there is one more complaint I do have about the movie that, well, this is a complaint. The other things I mentioned were just some things that may have had like a creative difference, and that's forgivable, but this I'm about to say, I don't like one bit. I think there are a lot of people that will agree with me, as much as I like to keep things neutral, natural, pretty chill. Princess Tildy serves nothing to this film. I was kind of surprised that they did decide to go with the plot point of Eggsy consummating with Princess Tildy as appreciation for saving her. I'm like, okay, it's a very it's fun. It's a joke, but not laughing too much. It was better just to leave the film at that point and just know, okay, they had their fling and went their separate ways, but do it in the asshole and they got a relationship? Like, that was, okay. I mean, I've heard of a hole-in-one, but my god, I don't know if it's a hole-in-one with this character. She's just kind of there. I'm sure that actress is great and she's doing everything she can. It's just an odd plot point, and that's not her fault. I've had to look at some movies that if I don't like a character, I can't fault the actor if they're giving their all for something or if they weren't sure what to do. It just was something they threw in there. If you take Princess Tildy out, you miss virtually nothing. She's just there for some of the film that you could take her parts out and the film will still flow as everything else. I hope she has other work that she's been a part of. I really do hope, because I just don't think she belonged in Kingsman. Hopefully that made sense. I like to keep things nice on here, even if I'm making a point about something I dislike, that it doesn't come off like hateful or mean. So, with Kingsman, despite the things that I mentioned, it's a solid sequel. I love the action in there. I can watch it over and over and over again and forgive the things that I don't particularly like about the film, because we're always going to have something that we don't particularly like about a movie, or something that will jive with someone else, but it won't jive with me, and that's okay. You know, the experience is your own to have, and I do love the experience I have with Kingsman, that there's so many moments that I push through to get to what I want to watch. Like, it's one of those films that you might not like something about it, but you don't mind it knowing what's around the corner. If that makes any sense. I'm getting a little tired, but, you know, I don't mind getting tired for Kingsman. So now, on to the Kingsman. And, man, oh, God. It's a movie. Don't know what happened to it, but it's a movie. So, I almost had the chance to finally watch one of the Kingsman movies in theaters. I didn't get the chance when The Golden Circle came out, because no one had seen Kingsman to want to go to watch a sequel with me. So with The Kingsman coming out, I'm like, okay, I'll give it a chance to go see in theaters, and holy shit. Oh, what a downgrade. I'm not that mean. Well, I can be a little mean towards movies, but everyone felt a little disappointed with The Kingsman. Even the people that don't even like the Kingsman movies were like, really? You went that route? So, The Kingsman is a prequel to The Kingsman. And that's not a bad start. There's been some teasers about what could happen. I mentioned in the last movie that Statesman was going to be a proposed spin-off film. And not to be criticizing, but they should have gone with the Statesman since those are the characters that were hyped up. There was a history of Kingsman being talked about, that there have been tailor shops that have been the base for a lot of spies, which is true, so it doesn't look like far-fetched. Even I had to do some digging while I was recording this episode to find out that that's why they chose the tailor shops, because it does parallel history, which is great. So now we're seeing the origins of Kingsman and the tailor shop and everything else, which, okay, I don't mind that. I'd love to learn how the beginning happened for Kingsman. Just don't know what fucking direction this movie took. It has an identity. It's just somewhere in there. I feel like they threw so many different plot points in there that it's like, I don't know which direction I'm going into. It's like if you were a dog and the owner just dropped like 20 bouncy balls and it's like, which one do I go for first? There's the plot with Orlando and his son. Then there's the plot with some of the other Kingsman people that he works with. There's some of Jamon Hoson's character. There's something else going on with Rasputin. I'm like, wait a minute. We have Rasputin in this film? What? Can we bring back Elton John somewhere? I don't know. That's not possible, but just, I was a little bit shocked about the different directions that it took. It's still wild and it's still zany, but it's like a mild wild and kind of a drainy zany is the way that I would put it. So, I watched this film with my best friend Ace. I had promised him that we were going to watch the last Kingsman movie together because we didn't get a chance to see it in theaters, and he got to be introduced to the Kingsman series because of me. And it just like lit me up when he kept asking to extend the time to borrow the Kingsman DVDs. And I didn't mind because he loved it so much. He looked like a kid on Christmas. I love that experience of sharing movies, and we got to have an experience to watch the Kingsman, and oh, it was an experience, all right. While we were working on the proofreading for my book, Inglorious Inc. American Dream Scheme Part 3, oh god, there was a scene that just had us scratching our heads, and we were never going to recover from what we watched. So, there's a thing within this movie that has a plot point where Orlando Oxford has an injured leg due to getting shot, so he's always like walked with a limp, and I don't know how to explain this without cringing and almost falling into embarrassment, but Rhys Ifans plays Rasputin, and he like so I don't know what happened with this, but he was originally going to be with Orlando's son, as if he's like pimping out his own son. It's like, what are you doing? And instead, Orlando and Rasputin end up in like a room alone, and the whole plot is to like kill Rasputin. So it's like, whether it's Orlando or his son, like one or the other is gonna get him, but it just was an odd way to get that across. Even Richmond Valentine having the McDonald's thing with Carrie Hart was enjoyable and not cringy like this thing I'm about to tell you about that I've been procrastinating on. So Rasputin gets down on his knees and he starts like sexually licking at Orlando's leg, and Orlando is like practically orgasming, and I'm like, Ace, what are we watching? I'm scared. It was like, we had no idea what was going on. Like, I can laugh about it now because it does look like laughably odd, but that's the whole point. It is odd. I would have never thought this is where the Kingsman movies would, like, get to. I just felt like that scene could have been done differently. I don't know what the fuck happened. I still don't know what the fuck happened. It's a question I don't have to have an answer for. Even though I know it was the whole point to heal his leg, but I'm like, why does licking a leg mean instant healing? That makes no sense. I just want a different type of sense to happen. But there is one credit that I do have to give the film, and it's been a credit shared amongst many other film critiquers, is The Kingsman did take a different approach than the last two films. The one thing that you can look at with a third film, especially with a prequel, is it going to parallel another character? And the writing was on the wall with, is there going to be a parallel to what happened to Harry? Harry was like one of the main pieces of Kingsman that really held things together. He was our introduction to Kingsman. And there was a bit of a stretch to see Conrad as a foil to Harry. Conrad's character is one of the things I do enjoy about the movie. It is nice to see the father-son dynamic shown, just like the father-son dynamic that we saw with Harry and Eggsy in the first two films. At least that is kind of the squint and you can see the parallel. You gotta squint really hard, but you can see that parallel that kind of does combine all three films together with one of the themes they had. Everything else, I don't know what the fuck happened. With Conrad's character, there was kind of a ballsy move that they made, and in a way, despite the fact that it hurt the film to not see more of his character, but they killed him off. So if memory serves, don't quote me on this because I've only seen the movie one time and I kind of want to keep it that way, but Conrad poses as another soldier and then he's found out because Conrad didn't keep up the accent that he was supposed to have. So when he reached the other soldier fort, he was shot for being an imposter. And with Conrad's sacrifice, what he did was he sent his friend home with his information. So Conrad's mission was complete to have the information carry on with his friend. However, that meant Conrad lost his life. That seems like a Harry Hart move right there, to know when Harry Hart got shot in the first film, but he was alive in the second, but now you know Conrad's never coming back. I didn't really feel the weight of loss with Conrad. And I felt like I didn't know Conrad enough to feel the weight of the loss. I felt that with Harry, when he died, when he lost his memory. I felt that when Merlin exploded in the Golden Circle. But I didn't really feel that. And it's kind of sad because I'm supposed to. For a film that's very long, it's like, 2 hours long to my memory, we don't get enough time with some of these characters. I didn't get enough time with Jamon Hossol's character, who was supposed to be the first Merlin. I didn't get enough time with the other female character, whose name I sadly don't remember. I know we spent time with Orlando, but I felt like I also didn't know Orlando enough, besides being a grieving husband and a grieving father, and getting his legs sexually, lickingly healed by Rasputin. That's kind of sad that that's off the cusp of my memory. There are so many people in this star power movie that give a great job to a film that just went too many different directions. The King's Man was just kind of a strange note to go on. There were things that I liked about the movie, there were things that many people liked about the movie, but a lot of people felt the same way, and I can agree with a lot of them, that they felt that something was just missing. The same kind of charm that we saw from the Secret Service and the Golden Circle, and it just kind of felt like it took the problem areas from the Golden Circle and put it into the King's Man. I do have to say, for a prequel, it does set the stage for what we would eventually see with Kingsman. We know who's going to be Merlin. We know what it's going to be like for Harry eventually. But here's an idea that I want to throw out that could have possibly changed the dynamic of the Kingsman. What if it was set in the 90s? Like, there would still be some references of the first tailor shop and the birth of Kingsman, but having it that it can lead straight into when we saw Harry and Eggsy's dad going on the mission that basically changed everyone's lives. I feel like that would be a really good bookend to what is considered the beginning. So it kind of goes like full circle. You could watch them all in the same order and just go around and around and around and around and around. that sounds like a great idea. There's a friend of mine that did that with his book series where he produced a prequel that led straight into his first book. It's just, I guess, just different angles. And this is just an angle that I can understand. It's just not really an angle that really got produced all the way through. There are just some holes in that whole plan that still is executed. I still have to give them credit that they did push through with the idea and presented the end of Kingsman. But that does still beg the question, is it really the end of the Kingsman series? I mentioned a couple times that Statesman is still an idea for a project. Not confirmed, but an idea. So, with the fact that the Golden Circle is still getting some new leeway coming through and is breathing some new life with Pedro Pascal's fame highlighting that film, I wonder if that can be one of the keys to getting Statesman recognized more, that people are going to find the Kingsman movies. It's going to be coming on to 10 years next year when Kingsman first made its debut as the live-action movie. So we'll just have to see what happens. Above all, it's a great series. Besides the last film, it does have some moments, but God, it's so fun. Where I have a lot of friends that say Marvel, some say DC, I say Kingsman. Even though I haven't gotten around to reading the books, I do love the fact that we have a different type of comic book movie. And a lot of people wouldn't have thought about that until someone loved it so much, that person being Matthew Vaughn, to turn it into a live-action series. And everyone loved the movie. Taron Egerton praises this film every chance he gets to share the roots of what lifted him up into fame. I'm sure Pedro Pascal has some things to say about working on Kingsman, with that being one of his very first few comic book origin movies before he would go on to go do Star Wars and The Last of Us. And it's great to see Colin Firth getting the chance to be in an action film. I absolutely love it. There's just so many things to appreciate about an underappreciated series, but I'm hoping that'll change eventually. So, that is officially a wrap on the Kingsman movies. This was a hell of a ride. Thank you for being here for this long episode. It's been a while since I've done a triple threat episode. But now, let's move on to find out what the next episode is going to be on the Screen Queen. If you're new here, thank you for staying for this hour-long special. You're a trooper. So I have a whole bunch of random suggestions in a box, and I randomly pull out what that episode is going to be. So we both find out together what the next episode is going to be. Isn't that special? So here we go. Let me just mix this up really good. I'm hoping pieces don't fly out like last time. Okay, I think that's mixed up good enough. Alright, I got a piece from the bottom. What are you? Show me your secrets! Okay. I don't mind this at all. This is an interesting pick. So, the next episode on the Screen Queen is going to be Men at Work. I'm sure a lot of people don't know what that movie is, and if they do, oh my god. I appreciate you for that, because not many people do. Alrighty. Well, thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you taking time of your day to listen to these episodes. It's amazing to see how far the show has grown, and there's been more people finding the show every day and telling me what they love about it, and it just warms my heart. So if you'd like to catch up with me in between uploads, if you want to catch up with me on Instagram and talk about how hot you found Harry Hart, oh god, don't ever get tired of saying that, you can find me at the Queen of the Screen on Instagram. And if you'd like to catch up with me on TikTok, I do some funny little updates up there with some movie content. You can find me at The Mystical Space Switch. And if you're interested in finding out the series that I wrote, you can find it on Amazon. And it is in the description box. My voice is tired of tripping over my own frickin' tongue. Okay. You all take care now. And remember, manners maketh man. Y'all take care now. Bye-bye!